I never thought my own sister would humiliate me in front of the entire family. That Thanksgiving night, she looked me straight in the eye and sneered, "You're just an AC tech. You don't belong here." Then she kicked me out of the dinner I helped pay for. My hands shook, my heart pounded, and I could feel every set of eyes burning into my back as I walked out the door. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was knowing I had been funding her college dreams for years, sacrificing everything, while she secretly laughed at me behind my back. When I was 23, barely out of trade school, I promised myself I would take care of Emily no matter what. She was only 15 then, bright-eyed and full of dreams, about becoming the first in our family to graduate from a prestigious university. I worked 12-hour shifts crawling through attics, fixing air conditioners in the summer heat, and shivering in basements during the winter, just so I could send a portion of my paycheck home. Every month, without fail, I transferred money into her savings account. My father called me the responsible one. My mother reminded me that family always comes first, and I believed them. Back then, there were moments that felt almost pure. Emily would hug me after I wired her another semester's tuition, whispering, "Thank you, sis. You're the reason I'm going to make it." Those words were like fuel. They made every aching muscle and every grease stain on my uniform worth it. I thought, this is what family is for, to sacrifice for each other. In those moments, I imagined future Thanksgivings where we would sit together, proud of how far she'd come, both of us grateful for the bond we shared. But slowly, cracks began to appear, small ones that I chose to ignore. Emily rarely asked me how I was doing. When I told her about a difficult repair job or a rude customer, she would roll her eyes and say, "At least you get overtime." She never seemed interested in my life, only in what I could provide. At the time, I brushed it off. She was young, I told myself, too focused on her studies to notice. Still, the truth lingered like a splinter under the skin. I remember one evening when I drove 3 hours after work to surprise her at her dorm. I had bought her groceries, a new jacket, even a small necklace to encourage her before finals. She opened the door, her face tight with discomfort, as if my presence embarrassed her. Her roommate glanced at me and then at Emily, who laughed awkwardly. "This is my sister. She fixes air conditioners." The words were meant as an introduction, but the tone carried something sharper, something that cut deeper than she probably realized. Later that night, while she scrolled on her phone, I overheard her whispering to a friend, "Yeah, my sister's nice, but she's kind of basic. She'll never understand the world I'm going into." I pretended not to hear. I folded the blanket I had brought for her bed, left some cash on the desk, and drove home in silence. I convinced myself it was just teenage arrogance, that she didn't mean it. I wanted to believe she still saw me as more than just a wallet in work boots. The messages came next, short, guilt-laced requests. "Hey sis, I hate asking, but my textbooks are super expensive this semester." Or, "The cafeteria food sucks. Can you send me money for better meals?" Sometimes she'd add, "You're the best. I don't know what I'd do without you." Those words looked sweet on the screen, but they started to feel mechanical, like she was typing them automatically because she knew that's what would unlock my generosity. Deep down, I felt the shift, but I silenced that voice. After all, family means trust, right? Gaslighting has a way of slipping into your bones without you realizing. When I questioned her spending once, why she had a new designer bag, when I knew tuition was already covered, she laughed. "Come on, sis, don't you trust me? You're overthinking. You always worry too much." The way she said it made me feel guilty, like I was the unreasonable one. And so I kept paying. There were still soft moments that made me doubt myself. On her 21st birthday, she raised a glass and toasted to me in front of her friends. "To my sister, who makes all of this possible." Everyone clapped, and for a brief second I felt proud. But looking closer at her eyes, I caught something else, something performative, as if the toast was less about gratitude and more about showing off. As if she was saying, "Look what I can make my sister do for me." I realize now that these moments weren't isolated. They were threads of the same fabric, each one woven with quiet manipulation. But at the time, I couldn't see the pattern. I wanted so desperately to believe that my sacrifices were shaping her future, that one day she would look back and truly appreciate me. Years later, I would stumble across bank statements that painted the real picture. But in those early days, I was blind with loyalty, convinced love meant giving until it hurt. And hurt it did. I thought I was building a future for both of us. In reality, I was building a pedestal for her to stand on while she looked down at me. But there was one detail, so small, so seemingly insignificant, that I missed entirely. One detail that would change everything I thought I knew about my sister. I didn't see it then, not until years later, when it exploded in front of the entire family. All it took was one Thanksgiving dinner. Thanksgiving had always been complicated in our family, but that year felt different from the start. I remember walking into my sister's house, the air thick with the smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon candles, and feeling the eyes on me before I even set down the pie I had baked. Emily's home looked polished and expensive, the kind of place people in magazines lived in, not the kind of place built from part-time jobs or student loans. I told myself it was a product of her success, that she had worked hard, but a pit of unease settled in my stomach. The first hour went fine, small talk, forced laughter, relatives asking the same questions they always did. I laughed when my uncle patted my shoulder and said, "Still fixing air conditioners? That's honest work, good on you." Emily winced like the words embarrassed her. I noticed, but I swallowed the sting. I had been swallowing moments like that for years. Dinner was served, the turkey carved, the plates passed around. Everyone was halfway through their meal when it happened. Emily put down her fork, leaned back in her chair, and with a smirk that could slice skin, she said, "Honestly, Sarah, I don't know why you're even here. You're just an AC tech. You don't belong at this table." The clinking of cutlery stopped. My mother froze, her fork midair. My father cleared his throat, but said nothing. The silence grew louder than any scream. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the table. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her, but the mocking curl of her lips told me I hadn't. I wanted someone, anyone, to defend me, to tell her she was out of line. Instead, no one spoke, not a word. My cheeks burned as if every relative had slapped me across the face. I stood up, my chair scraping the hardwood, and forced myself not to cry. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. "Excuse me," I whispered, though my voice shook. Then I walked toward the door, the sound of my boots against the floor echoing in the silence. On the porch, the cold air stung my skin, sharp and unforgiving. I leaned against the railing, my chest heaving. Betrayal had a physical weight, pressing down on me until my knees felt weak. The words kept replaying in my mind. You don't belong here. Do you know what it feels like to be erased by your own blood? To realize in one public moment that the sacrifices you made meant nothing, that your place in the family was conditional on status, on prestige, on what you could give, not who you were. That night, I knew I could have driven home then, curled up in bed, and let the humiliation swallow me whole. But something shifted. As the cold seeped through my jacket, I felt a clarity that had never been there before. For years, I had played the role of the giver, the dependable one, the invisible backbone. That night, I realized I wasn't invisible. I was being used. I thought about every deposit I had made into her college fund, every late shift I had picked up to cover her tuition, every dream of my own I had postponed. All so she could stand there and call me beneath her. My stomach turned. The truth hit like ice water. I had been financing not her gratitude, but her arrogance. Inside, laughter picked up again, faint through the glass door, as if my absence had erased the discomfort. I stood there, watching my breath fog in the cold air, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to beg for respect anymore. I wasn't going to be the silent donor to her shiny life. Something had to change. The next day, I pulled out my files, the receipts, the bank transfers. For the first time, I looked at the numbers not with pride, but with suspicion. Thousands upon thousands of dollars had flowed from my account into hers. My hands clenched as I scrolled through the records. And then I noticed something odd, expenses that didn't match tuition schedules, clothing stores, restaurants, even a flight to Miami. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe she had used her own money and just listed my name. But the totals didn't lie. A pattern emerged, and with it, a truth that cut deeper than her words at Thanksgiving. She hadn't just disrespected me. She had deceived me. I felt the walls around me close in, the room spinning as if I were falling. Rage, sorrow, disbelief, they all collided inside me. Yet beneath it all was something steadier, resolve. If Emily thought she could spit on my sacrifices and keep bleeding me dry, she was wrong. That night, as I sat in the dark with only the glow of my laptop screen, I whispered to myself, no more. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about dignity, about reclaiming the self-worth I had handed over piece by piece. I didn't know exactly how I would do it yet, but the seed had been planted. I would stop being the victim. I would stop being the invisible provider. From now on, every choice I made would be deliberate, strategic. Emily had written me off as just an AC tech. She had no idea I was about to become something far more dangerous, a sister with nothing left to lose. And I promise you this, what happened next wasn't rage. It wasn't a tantrum. It was calculated. Because the moment you stop begging for love, you start planning for justice. The morning after Thanksgiving, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, the glow from the screen lighting up the circles under my eyes. I hadn't slept. Instead, I replayed the scene over and over. Emily's smirk, the silence of my parents, the heat of humiliation crawling up my neck. My hands hovered over the keyboard, trembling as I logged into my online banking. For years, I had avoided looking too closely. I didn't want to count how much I had given her, because then I would have to admit how much I had sacrificed. But now I needed to see the truth. The numbers hit me like a gut punch. Line after line of transfers, semester after semester, thousands upon thousands flowing from my account into hers. I told myself I had built her future with that money, but then other transactions caught my eye. Charges from designer boutiques, a resort hotel in Miami, a luxury car rental company. I clicked back through months of statements, my pulse racing. This wasn't tuition. This wasn't textbooks. It was indulgence, lavish spending hidden beneath the guise of education. I shoved my chair back, pressing my palms against my face. My throat tightened, tears spilling hot and fast. It wasn't just the money, it was the betrayal, the realization that every extra hour I had sweated in attics and basements had been turned into cocktails and handbags. I had been financing not her future, but her arrogance. My sobs shook the room until finally my body went still, the tears drying into resolve. When I looked back at the screen, my perspective had shifted. The bank statements weren't just proof of my sacrifice anymore. They were evidence, and evidence, I realized, was power. I began documenting everything. I printed statements, highlighted transactions, made notes in the margins. I created folders, one for tuition payments, one for unexplained charges, one for potential witnesses. The more I organized, the calmer I felt. Pain slowly sharpened into focus. If Emily had played me for a fool, then I would stop playing. Still, even with evidence, I needed perspective. I wasn't ready to go at this alone. So I reached out to people I trusted. My friend Jenna, a paralegal, invited me over one evening. I laid the papers across her coffee table, my voice unsteady as I explained. She scanned them carefully, her brows furrowing. "Sarah," she said finally, "this isn't just careless spending. This looks deliberate. She's been exploiting you." Hearing the words spoken aloud felt both crushing and validating. Jenna encouraged me to consult a financial advisor. So I did. Mr. Collins, a gray-haired man with sharp eyes, studied the statements silently before leaning back in his chair. "You've been underwriting a lifestyle, not a degree," he told me bluntly. "If you want to stop, you need to prepare yourself. People don't give up free money without a fight." His warning rang in my ears. At night, when I couldn't sleep, I turned to online support forums for siblings of toxic families. Strangers shared stories eerily similar to mine. Siblings who siphoned money, parents who enabled, betrayals that cut deeper than any enemy's blade. For the first time, I realized I wasn't alone. There was a community of survivors who had walked this path, and their strength became mine. Then came the twist I hadn't expected. Over coffee, I ran into a former classmate of Emily's. We hadn't spoken in years, but when I mentioned her name, his face shifted into something between amusement and disdain. "Emily, oh, she used to brag about you all the time," he said. She'd laugh and tell people her sister was dumb enough to pay for everything. She literally said, "My sister's stupid, but she's useful. I just have to ask, and she'll hand over the money." His words sliced deeper than any insult at Thanksgiving ever could. My breath caught in my chest, my vision blurring. For years, I had imagined Emily laughing behind my back, but to hear it confirmed so casually was devastating. She hadn't just taken my money, she had mocked me for giving it. I sat there in the cafe, staring at the steam rising from my untouched coffee, 1,000 emotions crashing inside me. Shame, rage, heartache. But then beneath all of it, something steadier bloomed, clarity. If she thought I was stupid, then she underestimated me, and that, I realized, would be her downfall. I gathered my papers, my laptop, my notes. Every shred of evidence was now more than proof. It was a weapon. Not one to destroy her recklessly, but one I would wield with precision. Timing would be everything. If I struck too soon, she would twist the story, make me the villain. But if I waited, if I chose the perfect moment, the truth would cut through every lie she had spun. As I tucked the folder into my bag, a strange calm settled over me, the kind that comes not from rage, but from knowing you finally hold the upper hand. With the evidence in my hands, the witnesses behind me, and the truth too sharp to ignore, I whispered to myself, "All that's left is the right moment." I didn't draft a long letter. I didn't call her to explain or give her the satisfaction of hearing my voice. I opened my laptop, typed one line, and hit send. From now on, you're on your own. That was it. No apology, no argument, no justification. After years of long-winded explanations and tearful pleas, I realized the most powerful thing I could offer was silence. The email must have landed like a bomb, because only 10 minutes later, my phone started buzzing nonstop. Calls, texts, voicemails. Her name lighting up my screen like an emergency siren. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched as the messages piled up. At first, they were demands. "You can't just stop paying now." Then they shifted to bargaining. "I'll pay you back someday, I swear. Just don't do this to me now." And finally, to panic. "They're going to find out. Please, Sarah, well, I can't let them find out." That line stopped me cold. They're going to find out. Find out what? My stomach twisted as I stared at the screen. When I ignored her calls long enough, she finally broke and left me a long, rambling voicemail. Her voice was trembling, her words rushed. She confessed to racking up credit card debt, borrowing from classmates, even taking out a private loan she had no means to repay. All the while, she had relied on my transfers to cover the facade. Without my money, the whole illusion was about to collapse. I pressed my palms against my forehead, my breath uneven. Part of me felt pity. I remembered the little girl who used to trail behind me, clutching my hand, begging me not to leave her on the first day of school. That memory tugged at me, whispering, "Help her one more time." But then another memory surfaced, the Thanksgiving table, her voice dripping with disdain as she dismissed me in front of everyone. My chest tightened with the tug-of-war inside me. Was I a monster if I let her drown? Or had I been the fool all along for keeping her afloat? I sat there for hours, the weight of her words pressing down on me, until clarity returned like a blade cutting through fog. Saving her again wouldn't change who she was. It would only delay the reckoning she had been running from. And so, for the first time in my life, I chose myself. I turned off my phone and went to bed. The storm broke the very next day. Emily must have realized I wouldn't respond, because she turned to the one weapon she still had, family. By the afternoon, my parents were calling, my mother's voice sharp with accusation. "How could you abandon your sister like this? She needs you. She's on the verge of losing everything." Then came my father, sterner but no less judgmental. "Sarah, you've always been the strong one. We raised you to take care of each other. Don't let pride get in the way of family." Their words landed heavy, but instead of guilt, I felt something else. Anger. Pride? Was it pride to stop being exploited? Emily had framed me as the villain, painting herself the helpless victim. The family chat thread lit up with messages, cousins chastising me, an aunt sighing that I had changed. For a moment, their disapproval threatened to break me. Until one unexpected message appeared. It was from Uncle James, the quiet one who rarely spoke. He wrote privately, "Don't let them guilt you. She's been talking behind your back for years. Told us you were pathetic, that you'd never get anywhere. I kept my mouth shut because I didn't want drama, but you deserve to know." I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding. His words confirmed what I had long suspected, but to see them spelled out was like being doused in ice water. Emily hadn't just taken my money, she had systematically dismantled my reputation within the family, piece by piece. All those years of subtle snickers, the lack of respect, the way relatives brushed me off, it hadn't been imagined. She had planted those seeds. A wave of emotions hit me all at once. First, sympathy, because a part of me still mourned the sister I thought I had. Then shock at how deep the betrayal ran. And finally, anger, cold, steady, unshakable. The irony was almost poetic. Emily had tried to weaponize the family against me, but in doing so, she exposed herself. She had underestimated how long lies can last before truth seeps through the cracks. And this time I didn't have to lift a finger. Her own words, spoken behind my back, were coming to light. I realized then that revenge didn't always look like a dramatic confrontation. Sometimes the sharpest blade was patience. All I had to do was let her unravel, so I stepped back. I let the drama swirl, the accusations fly, the sympathy gather around her, because I knew what no one else did. Beneath that mask of helplessness was a debt-ridden, manipulative girl whose secrets were piling up fast. And when those secrets finally surfaced, the family would have no choice but to ask themselves, who was really the betrayer here? The fallout came faster than I expected. Within weeks of my cutting her off, Emily's carefully constructed life began to unravel. First came the suspension notice from her university. She hadn't paid tuition on time. Without my steady deposits, the balance was impossible to cover. Then came the whispers among her friends. I caught fragments on social media, posts that seemed aimed at her. Funny how some people act rich until the bills come due. Slowly, the invitations to parties and brunches disappeared. Her phone must have been quieter than mine for once. I thought that would be the end of it, her living with the consequences of her own choices. But then, the twist I could never have predicted landed in my lap. One Monday morning, I got a service call from a local office building. Nothing unusual. Their central AC unit was down, and I went with my team to handle it. As I pulled up to the building, toolbox in hand, I froze. There, walking out the side entrance in a wrinkled polo with a name badge clipped to her chest, was Emily, my sister, my betrayer, my client's new part-time receptionist. For a second, neither of us moved, her face drained of color, her eyes wide like a deer in headlights. The roles had reversed so perfectly, it almost felt scripted. She had laughed at me for being just an AC tech, and now here she was, handing out visitor passes for the company that had hired me as their trusted contractor. "Sarah," she whispered, her voice tight, almost broken. I gave her a polite nod, nothing more, before turning back to my work. My crew set up ladders, pulled out equipment, while Emily stood awkwardly by the front desk, pretending to type. Every so often, I caught her stealing glances at me, her jaw clenched, her eyes wet. Inside, I expected triumph to swell, to feel the sweet rush of victory I had fantasized about. But instead, what washed over me was something quieter, relief, a weight lifting, a chain snapping. It wasn't joy at her downfall. It was freedom from the endless cycle of giving, begging, and being spat on. That night, lying in bed, I thought about her face. There was no satisfaction in her humiliation, only a dull ache like looking at an old wound. I didn't want revenge anymore. What I wanted was peace. It took me days to fully process it. I replayed the moment again and again, asking myself what justice really meant. Was it watching her suffer, reduced to the kind of work she once mocked? Or was it stepping back and refusing to let her bitterness shape my life any longer? Justice, I realized, wasn't about flipping the script, so she felt the same pain I did. That would only tether me to her forever. True justice was letting go of the grip she had on me, reclaiming my energy, my time, my dignity. So when my mother called, voice heavy with tears, telling me Emily was struggling, I listened without flinching. I didn't offer money. I didn't promise rescue. Instead, I told her calmly, "Mom, I've done my part. She needs to live her own choices now." My mother fell silent, maybe realizing for the first time that her oldest daughter had drawn a line that would never be erased. And surprisingly, I didn't feel guilt. I felt steady, grounded. One weekend, I stopped by the office building again for a follow-up maintenance check. Emily was still at the desk, her shoulders hunched, her smile forced as she signed visitors in. When she saw me, she gave a small, reluctant nod. Not arrogance, not entitlement, just acknowledgement. It was the first honest interaction we had shared in years. Walking past her, I understood something crucial. I hadn't destroyed her life. She had. And I wasn't her savior anymore either. She was simply another adult, navigating the consequences of her actions. That understanding softened something inside me. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't triumphant. I was free. But don't mistake that freedom for closure. Because standing there, smelling the faint oil of machinery on my hands, and watching my sister sink into a chair she once would have sneered at, I knew this journey wasn't over. My story didn't end with cutting her off or watching her stumble. It was only beginning, because true justice wasn't about her downfall. It was about my rise, and I was just getting started. In the weeks that followed, I made a promise to myself. No more chaos, no more open doors. For people who only wanted to take. I changed my phone number, locked down my social media, and informed the bank to flag any unusual attempts to access my accounts. For the first time, my life was quiet. No desperate texts at midnight, no constant pressure to give until I had nothing left. The silence felt strange at first, like walking into a room after years of endless noise, but soon it became comforting. Then, one evening, as I was finishing paperwork in my small but growing office, an email came in. It was from Emily. The subject line read, "Please, just one last time." My finger hovered over the trackpad, my chest tightening. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The message was long, frantic, filled with words I had read 100 times before. She said she was drowning, that no one else understood her, that she was sorry for the things she had said, and then the inevitable request, money to cover yet another emergency. For a moment, I felt the old instinct rise up, the urge to rescue her, to be the reliable sister she could always fall back on. My throat tightened with the weight of memory. I closed my eyes and saw us as children, sitting on the wooden steps of our porch, popsicles melting down our fingers as we laughed about nothing. I remembered how small her hand felt in mine, how she used to run to me when she was scared. Those memories tugged hard, pulling me toward the past. But then I opened my eyes. I wasn't that naive sister anymore, and Emily wasn't that little girl clinging to me. She was an adult who had burned every bridge, who had turned love into a transaction. And I had learned the hardest, most liberating lesson of my life. Boundaries are love turned inward. I hit delete. The next morning, I felt lighter than I had in years. The old ache still stirred when I thought of what could have been between us, but it no longer chained me. I wasn't cruel. I was free. With Emily out of the picture, I poured myself into my work. For years, I had been the dependable technician, the one who showed up early, stayed late, and got the job done right. Now I decided to turn that reputation into something bigger. I started my own AC company, small at first, just me and 2 colleagues who believed in me. Word spread quickly. Clients appreciated my honesty, my dedication, and the way I treated even the smallest jobs as important. Within a year, we had more contracts than we could handle. But the success wasn't just financial, it was emotional. For the first time, I wasn't giving everything away to someone who dismissed me. I was building something that was mine. Every invoice paid, every customer who shook my hand with gratitude, every employee who looked at me with trust, it all stitched together a new identity. I wasn't just an AC tech. I was a business owner, a leader, a woman who had survived betrayal and turned it into power. Outside of work, I began to create what I called my chosen family. Friends who stood by me during my darkest nights, colleagues who celebrated my wins, even strangers from online communities who shared my story and offered encouragement. Slowly, my life filled with people who didn't want anything from me except my authentic self. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit on my porch with a cup of tea, looking up at the stars. I would think of Emily, not with rage, but with a bittersweet acceptance. She had been both my greatest burden and my greatest teacher. She taught me that love without respect is exploitation, that family without trust is a cage, and most importantly, she taught me that I could survive the unthinkable and come out stronger. The woman who once cried in silence after being humiliated at Thanksgiving was gone. In her place stood someone unshaken, someone who knew her worth. I no longer measured myself by titles or by what I could give away. I measured myself by the peace I carried in my chest and the boundaries I refused to compromise. Looking back, I realized my story wasn't about her downfall. It was about my rise. Family can betray you. They can break you, bleed you, and leave you wondering if you ever mattered. But here's the truth I carry now. You can always rebuild. You can always reclaim yourself. You can always rise from the ashes of betrayal and become someone stronger, wiser, and freer than before. Because family can betray you, but you can always be reborn into the strongest version of yourself.